Hello and welcome back to the Project Management PrepCast, where we peer into what you need to know to prepare for your exam. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. Yeah, that was just a fun play on words in my introduction, because this lesson does involve some peering, by peers, no less. More specifically, we take a closer look at peer project reviews. Here is what we cover in this lesson. We first define what the peer project review is and cite some examples of how this technique is used in a variety of disciplines and areas. Next, we focus on peer reviews that are conducted to evaluate projects. We look at some characteristics of a peer project review and who participates in such a review. We also see how a peer review can differ widely from project to project. We also consider why you should be using this technique and the benefits it provides to projects. We then look at more details of what your peers actually peer into during the review. We reflect on which documents they are likely to scrutinize, what they are evaluating, as well as sorts of questions the project manager will have to address with them. Finally, we examine how to overcome some common challenges on peer project reviews. It appears that we use the word peer a lot in this lesson, along with some silly puns. Peer project reviews are more complex than they might look like at first glance, so we have split this lesson into two parts. Part 1 covers the high-level information about peer reviews, such as what a peer project review is, the types of peer project reviews, and their benefits. While in Part 2 we go through the details of what is done in a review, such as the format of the reviews, what they cover, and some of the challenges that they encounter. And without any further ado, why don't we peer into this lesson? The main concept of a peer project review is that it facilitates getting a better understanding of a project in relation to either a formal standard or informal set of expectations about how projects are run. The project manager and stakeholders benefit from many aspects of a peer project review. First, the primary reason to conduct one is to bring an objective view of the project's status. This helps to remove blind spot and brings fresh ideas to the project. In the end, there is a level of validation on whether the project is heading in the right direction to deliver maximum value. The result is that the project manager and stakeholders should have more information on how the project should proceed. As with many of our topics, a good place to start is with a definition of peer review. So, a peer review is the evaluation of work by one or more people of similar competence to the producers of the work. Peer reviews are employed to maintain standards of quality, improve performance, and provide credibility. In other words, work is evaluated by peers for the purpose of validation and improvement. In some fields, it is a form of self-regulation by qualified members of the profession. There is a stigma that peer reviews can be torturous, and some may be, but peer reviews mean something different depending on the setting, industry, or discipline. In a clinical peer review, doctors, dentists, and nurses review a peer's work to ensure that the healthcare services provided meet a certain standard. The review also may serve to confirm that a diagnosis is being made correctly, a treatment is being administered appropriately, or that a procedure is performed satisfactorily. This is where peer reviews have a daunting reputation, and when it comes to my diagnosis, frankly, I like it that way. In academic and scientific research, scholars and researchers in peer reviews look at each other's work or grant proposals to determine if the paper or grant is suitable to proceed. Similar to a healthcare setting, there are certain quality standards to which documents and research must uphold. In technical business fields such as software development, it is common to have a code or design review by one's peers. The goal of the review is to identify any bugs, vulnerabilities, inconsistencies, and other areas of improvement in the code. There are also document peer reviews. As an example, this and every other lesson on the Project Management PrepCast goes through a series of reviews before it is handed to me and I record it in the studio. In this case, one or more PMPs will review the work of another PMP. Nevertheless, the same goes for other documents. A business analyst's peer review might involve, for example, a business analyst reviewing a requirements document written by another business analyst. Note that in all cases, our definition of peer review still applies, since competent reviewers are evaluating the work of their peers. You may have used one or more of these type of peer reviews on your own projects by looking at project documents or deliverables. This is the focus of this lesson, the peer review that takes place at a project level. There are dozens of types of project reviews, some with just one person, like your boss, or with groups of people. Each brings a different value. Most reviews are classified into three broad categories. Customer project reviews are generally looking for some form of approval. You could be looking for approval of an outcome or a direction, but in general, the customer assumes you know how to manage projects and does not expect to be reviewing your processes. Sponsor project reviews are typically focused on whether your project is meeting corporate goals, objectives, and milestones. These may look deeper into the functioning of the project than customer reviews, but stay pretty high level. Peer project reviews look into details of a project, its inner workings and structure. They can do this because they are conducted by peers. This is people who know how to run projects. The intensity can cover a wide range. Obviously, for this lesson, we focus on the detailed reviews conducted by peers. In the context of a project, program, or portfolio, a peer project review is an evaluation or audit of your project by one or more project management practitioners who are not part of your project team. Peer reviews evaluate the assumptions and reasoning you have applied in your project planning. They can question your thought process in how you handle issues or make decisions. They may review your calculations and estimates for time and costs. They may check for errors or inconsistencies. For example, you may be using an outdated cost basis, or perhaps you did not account for holidays or vacation time in your schedule. Based on the information you share, peer reviews may provide alternative solutions, interpretations, and suggestions. They can consider your approach and compare it against the organizational standards and methodologies that you should be following. For example, if this were an end-of-phase peer project review, they might verify that you double-check the organizational lessons learned databases for the next phase. Therefore, if your organization or industry has defined standards and acceptance criteria, reviewers might examine your project in detail and judge your performance against these set criteria. If you've been around projects for very long, you may be thinking, well, what is the difference between a peer project review and a retrospective? Both seem to be looking at a project and what it is doing, right and wrong. Well, there are a number of differences. Peer reviews are driven by an outsider who is a peer to the project, program, or portfolio manager. Peer reviews are also in the now. The project is running and you are gathering real-time information that you can apply to the project, program, or portfolio and change its performance. In addition, peer reviews may take several days, while the person running the review reads documents and interviews various people. A retrospective, on the other hand, is normally constrained to under a day in the format of one or more meetings that a trained facilitator may run, but the facilitator may not have project management knowledge. The attendees can be various stakeholders, executives, project managers, and team members who are all discussing what went right and wrong. Except in the case of agile projects where retrospectives occur at the end of each iteration, retrospectives typically happen at the end of the project or phase and are used to carry lessons learned forward to other projects or phases. A peer project review is beneficial in many ways. It brings a different perspective to the project. Reviewers are independent and external to the project. You as project manager are often so involved in the project that it is natural to form an unintentional bias or blindness. Your loss of objectivity may mean overlooking mistakes or missing obvious details. You may not be able to see the forest for the trees. Peer project reviews can also thwart groupthink within the team. Groupthink is the phenomena where people in groups conform to the general thoughts of the group and do not express their opinions for fear of not looking like a team player. This desire for harmony and conformity within groups results in irrational or dysfunctional decision-making. Another benefit of peer project reviews is to confirm and reinforce the positive actions you are taking on your project. A peer review can help you gain confidence that you are heading in the right direction, utilizing an appropriate approach, and that you are making sound assumptions. However, oftentimes there are areas in which you can improve. A peer can help identify errors and gaps in scope, technique, and understanding or interpretation of organizational policy, to name but a few examples. A final benefit is that a peer review is useful in assessing why a project is in trouble or appears to be headed that way. Peer project reviews should not only be reflective in nature, where you review things you have done in the past, but also preventive, looking toward the future to be able to avoid or mitigate potential project risks and help ensure project success. There are many reasons to consider a peer project review. First, hierarchical, cultural, and political boundaries may prevent people from providing critical feedback about the project. Feedback from someone higher up in the chain of command can be interpreted as a reprimand or an order, such that you and your team may feel threatened or required to follow the direction. Direct reports, in other words, your team members or contractors, may also feel uncomfortable in providing critical input. It is often easier for the reviewee and reviewer to be peers who can give and receive comments, praise, and criticism as equals. It is also often the case that you give more credit and credence to criticism and praise coming from others who have managed projects themselves or have been in your shoes, so to speak. For peer project reviews to work, you should trust the reviewer's judgment as well as the review process. The atmosphere should be one of peers helping each other out. Peer reviews are not only beneficial for the project, but they can help the reviewer too. It is an opportunity for the reviewer to learn and grow as a project manager. Looking more closely at another project manager's work allows for a cross-pollination of ideas. Reviewers often have an aha moment where they see something that works on your project that may work on their project too. There are many reasons for conducting a peer review. First, consider the reason for holding the peer review to begin with. It is possible that a peer review can be voluntary and therefore occur at the project manager's request. Perhaps a PMO or functional manager has reason to initiate the process. It may even be mandatory in some organizations. Of course, if a project gets in trouble, the executive stakeholders may want a thorough evaluation of the project to ensure it is capable of meeting the organization's goals. The timing and frequency of peer reviews can vary from project to project. In some organizations, they are conducted at regular intervals, for example, quarterly. If you have a short, small project, however, this may not make much sense. Other times, it may make sense to conduct a review at the beginning or at the end of every phase. Early on in the project is a good time to conduct a peer review. As you should know, it is much less costly to find flaws and introduce changes at the beginning of the project rather than later on in the project lifecycle. Alternatively, reviews can be conducted at significant milestones or at particular points when a project is more vulnerable or at high risk. In sum, peer project reviews are highly individualized. Because of this variability, the type of reviews and their names vary, but here is an example of the commonly used names. To make life confusing, there is a type of peer project review that is just called a peer review. These are less formal reviews, often requested by the project managers to assure that most of the areas of the project have been covered, assumptions and risks are complete, scope appears to be correct, and the like. Health checks are often requested by a program manager or sponsor for more complex projects that have a history of trouble but may not be in trouble right now. They are just like going to the doctor for a physical checkup. They can often be scheduled periodically, maybe every 2 to 3 months. Audits are usually requested by an executive team or customer when a project gets into trouble. The goal of an audit is to determine how to get a project back on track or whether it should be cancelled. Most audits have a list of actions that are expected to be conducted as a result of the review. These actions may include reducing scope, restructuring the project or project team, or changing the project management methodology, among other things. To cover that wider range of purposes of the review, you can imagine that the attendees also vary. We start by looking at peer reviews and health checks. A peer review is not much of a peer review without a peer to do the review. So your peers would naturally be other project managers in your organization who are not directly involved in your project. These peers are key participants. They act as the independent reviewers who are not unduly influenced by you. The greater their domain, industry, and project management expertise, the more valuable the insights and recommendations are likely to be for you. Of course, then, there is you, the project manager. You must participate in the peer review process. You may not be required to be in the room at all times, but typically you introduce the project and its current state, as well as walk the reviewers through some of the key project documentation. One or more members of the project management team and even project team members may join in for portions, if not the entirety, of the summary report. However, remember the project team should be busy actually working on the project. Therefore, their participation is likely to be limited. Executive sponsors are often involved, as they should have accountability for the project as a whole. Minimally, the reviewers likely want to interview the sponsors to assess whether the project's objectives were properly captured, and there may be other key stakeholders that have critical information about the project's goals. It is possible that the customer is involved as well. If this is an internal project, it is generally okay to include them, but if this is an external project, a simple peer review could raise questions in the customer's mind. Be careful about including them in such a case. In the end, though, peer reviews and health checks are typically less formal and also less binding than an audit. For an audit, though, there are some major differences. First, there is usually more oversight involved. This is due to the nature of audits stemming from major issues in the project. There might even be a panel of reviewers that include other experts and managers. Program management office folks and portfolio managers, experts in technology, process risk, and even documentation specialists may be involved in scrutinizing the project. As well as the peer reviewer is often an external expert. This is usually a person or group that is highly specialized in project audits. The customer is almost always involved because the issues are bad enough that they are aware of them. They, in fact, are probably the reason the audit is being done. Audits are likely to be more formal and mandatory, both to do and to implement their recommendations. This is enough information to cover in one sitting. It's time to take a break so you can think about how a peer project review might help on one of your own projects. Here are some key takeaways before we go. Although they may feel punitive, the real goal of a peer review is to improve project performance. You should remember that a reviewer is going to focus on things you may be missing, as that is where you can improve. Unlike a retrospective, peer reviews are performed on projects that are running and are much more in-depth, taking days or even weeks. There are many types of peer reviews. They range from informal peer reviews to project health checks to audits. Straight peer reviews are the least formal, while audits are the most formal and may have serious outcomes on the project. Thanks for joining me for part 1 of our lesson on peer project reviews. I'll see you in part 2. Until next time.